Here we have our drip irrigation Rockwool slab hydroponics system. On this end, we have our nutrient stock tank. This stock tank has already been calibrated to 120 liters. We calibrate for two main reasons. One, so that we know how much water we've lost or used, and two, it helps better inform us how much salt we need to add back in, how much fertilizer we need to be adding every time we add water. Right here, we have our nutrient delivery system. This is just a pump that sends the nutrient solution through this line, through our emitters, into our slabs. Then we have the channel. This channel is used to recover the nutrient solution that is dripped through the slabs, because every time you irrigate, you're going to be losing some through the slabs. Next, of course, we have our actual slabs. These are a Grodan Rockwool slab, which we will, in the next video, be plumping up with water, which is the first step to setting up this system. Each of these Rockwool slabs includes an instructions list, as well as a diagram of how you know how to go about filling up and draining this slab for the first time. Now, when we do add water to pump this up the first time, they actually come pre-slit with a hole right here in which we can insert our hose so that we can start filling with nutrient solution. Once we've filled it with nutrient solution, we're going to let it sit for a significant amount of time, generally around 24 hours, to let the whole slab imbibe as much water as possible. Then, as per the instructions here, we're going to go to the bottom side of the slab and cut slits here, in the middle, and on the end, so that we have a total of 6 slits on each slab. This will help with the drainage so that we don't have our roots just continuously sitting in water. Here's our station where we weigh out our fertilizers based on these fertilizer recipes. For our Rockwool slab system, we're using the 3-bag system. That is the ChemGrow, which is our main source of nutrients and our micronutrients, our magnesium sulfate, and then our calcium nitrate. Based on this recipe and the fact that our tank is 120 liters, we will take 120 liters times 0.6 grams per liter of the ChemGrow. Then we'll do 0.3 of the calcium nitrate and 0.3 grams per liter of the magnesium sulfate. This we have already got weighed out. For our lettuce production, we're going to be using the 2-bag system, which you can see here is 0.75 grams of the fertilizer and 0.75 grams of calcium nitrate per liter. So that is this 2-bag hydroponic system, and then again, the calcium nitrate. The stock tank for the lettuce production system is 180 liters. So based on our recipe of 0.75 grams per liter of the main fertilizer and 0.75 grams per liter of the calcium nitrate, we will need 135 grams of the fertilizer. So we go ahead and set our beaker right here on the balance. Notice that we have it tarred out 0 grams. And we start adding the fertilizer salt until we reach 135 grams. Just like that, 135 grams of salt. And then we'll repeat the same process for the calcium nitrate. Here we have our 3-component salts sitting out ready to be mixed into our nutrient solution tank. The way that I prefer to go about doing this is by taking each individual nutrient salt and adding it into a 5-gallon bucket, mixing it in there, and then adding it into the nutrient stock tank. It is important to mix these 3-component salts independent of each other before adding them into the stock tank, as that is how you avoid any sort of precipitates forming. It is very common for the calcium and calcium nitrate to mix with the phosphate from the main fertilizer and precipitate out as calcium phosphate. This renders the calcium effectively useless. Here, I'm starting by adding about half of the nutrient salts from the main fertilizer into this 5-gallon bucket. I will then use this piece of PVC, because it works well for me, and mix it until you see no more fertilizer salt sitting at the bottom. At that point, you can dump it into the nutrient stock tank, refill the bucket from the nutrient stock tank, and begin adding the second half of your nutrient fertilizer. You will proceed to do this for each of the 3 component parts, again, independent of each other to avoid those precipitates. Now I have finished mixing the first half of that first nutrient salt, so I will take the bucket, dump it into the nutrient stock tank, refill the bucket, and then begin with the second half of the nutrient salts. You'll notice how that turned a different color. That's just those nutrient salts being in solution. I do like to use this opportunity to take a 5-gallon bucket and mix the solution around a little bit. It just helps make sure that those salts are distributed throughout before I take my next dip. With this next bucket full of water, or nutrient solution in this case, I can go ahead and add the rest of my nutrient salts, mix those up, and then continue on. Given how tedious this process is, it's understandable why many operations will choose to have all 3 component salts in separate, concentrated forms before they get introduced into the main stock tank. They do this so that they only have to mix it once, and it will constantly be dosed in to maintain perfect EC levels within their stock tank. This reduces labor and time associated with mixing up nutrient solution. Now that we've filled up our nutrient stock tank, we're going to go ahead and start plumping up our Rockwool slabs. We're going to do that by using a secondary pump connected here, running this separate line because we don't want to disconnect our line from our main nutrient pump as it's already plumbed in and ready to go. So for this process, all we're going to be doing is inserting this line into the pre-cut hole, plugging in the pump, and you can see nutrients coming out. I'm going to let that fill up this until it is completely plumping. You can already see it starting to inflate with air over here. And once it starts coming out of the top, we'll know that it is sufficiently plumped up and cannot take any more nutrient solution in it. Again, we will be leaving that for approximately 24 hours. And here we have the Rockwool slab very nearly getting completely full. Know this because it's starting to blow a lot of air out this hole, and that means that it is running out of space to finish the nutrient solution. There you can see it's starting to drip out of the hole, which means that we are full. Just a clarification on a previous point. Earlier I mentioned that the slab was filling with air. What I meant by that is it's filling with water and displacing the air that is in there. That is why it is so well inflated as it's getting filled up. This can be remedied by simply punching a second hole in the top so that you don't have this happen. Now that we've gotten all 4 of these plumped up, I'd like to point one thing out. Right here, it indicates the volume of our Rockwool slabs. These 8-inch slabs are a total of 13.5 liters. 13.5 times 4 is a little bit lower than 60. Now, we can see this is kind of cool because we've used approximately 60 liters of nutrient solution, given that we were up at the 120 line and are now down at the 60 liter line. This is just a neat observation. Now that we have let these slabs sit for a good period of time, imbibing water, the next step is going to be to go ahead and cut those slits in the bottom. For that, I'm just going to use a pair of scissors, go to those aforementioned end spots, middle spot, and end spot, and then I'll go ahead and do the same on the back side. After you've done that, you can go ahead and set the slab back in, and then you can go ahead and start cutting the holes where our 4-inch rock cubes will be inserted. Now I've gone ahead and already marked out approximately where I want those cubes to be in relative to the rest of the slab. So I'm going to go ahead and just cut a line a couple of inches this way, this way, this way, and this way. And that's where that slab's going to sit. And then I'll do the same here, trying to get it relatively centered in the slab itself. Now, these lines aren't perfect, but it doesn't really matter because once we set those 4-inch cubes in there, it's actually going to end up stretching this a little bit more, and that's what's going to cause more of a tight fit within that space. Now that we have all of the holes cut into our slabs, it's time to go ahead and insert the plants into those holes. For this step, I'm I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate with this one, where you just fold these tabs back, and then you're going to insert your cube, making sure that there is full contact all the way around. Now, that one's not quite finished. I'll have to come back and finish it, but these two are already done. Notice how this ends up coming around and creating not really a tight seal, but just forming a nice edge around it where we're going to reduce the area of potential evaporation out of the slab. Generally, all the water that's going to be, most of the water that's going to be lost out of this system should be through evapotranspiration, a little bit of evaporation out of here, and then our nutrient solution tank is going to end up being covered to reduce evaporation out of there. Once you have your plant set in, it's time to go ahead and add in our irrigation. So for this, we're going to be using these pressure compensated emitters. That's for these tomatoes specifically. And you do that just by inserting right like that, so that now when this irrigation system gets run, it's going to drip directly into where the plant is. And we're inserting them right here, so I have them outside of this main cube, just because fitting them in here can be a little bit tight and doesn't necessarily work all the time. So we have 2 emitters per plant, which should be just fine. Now we have all of our plants in the Rockwool slabs here, and we've set our irrigation system in line. The next step is going to be adding the trellising clips. The way these are made, they've got this little bracket in the back here, which has these little teeth which grip perfectly onto the string, as you can see here. Then you close it, and that will close around the stem. So, I've already done a few, and just give you a few examples. Right here, we've gone around this midsection here. It's not going to be pulling on those leaves very hard at all, actually. And this is just going to keep these plants growing upright. Now we're going to have to continue doing this trellising through the entire growth cycle, because eventually these will be as long as the sample that you saw in class. Now the other thing is, you remember that we had cucumber plants. Well, those are actually going into a different system. It's the same effective system, it's still a Rockwool slab, but these are called the Unislab by Grodan. And the way that these work is exactly the same as the Grow slab, as these. And we're still doing an overhead irrigation. Instead of using these pressure compensated drip emitters, we're actually using spray stakes, and you'll notice that it's 1 cucumber per slab. This is just kind of a personal preference, and we're going to be doing this trellising in a different fashion. Over here, we're going to be trellising the tomatoes directly down this line up there. You can see where the white spools of thread are hanging. These are going to be a different style, what's known as a V-style trellis, where this row of plants here is going to be trellised up to this structural component here that goes across, that truss, and these plants over here are going to be trellised over here against the wall. So that's just an example of 2 different types of trellising. Now that all the plants over here are trellised, we will be getting to these later once we get some lines set up. The very last step before we can close the door on this day's lab is going to be to run these systems and make sure that everything works. So I'm going to first run this spray stake system, and then I'll run the drip emitter system. These spray stakes, you can see they've turned on, and they're spraying directly on that 4-inch cube, which is exactly what we want to see. All of these seem to be looking great, except for perhaps this one, which seems to be spraying in odd directions. We might try replacing that with a different emitter. Now we'll go ahead and unplug this one and try the other. Now we've plugged in this pressure compensated drip emitter, and let's go ahead and take a look at what we're seeing. These first couple are working excellently, dripping nice and slowly, and then we have some that aren't dripping at all. And that is in fact a problem. So we'll have to address that. It could be that the emitters are just clogged, it could be other issues. Can't say at this moment, but we're just going to try to play around with some things and we'll get that running right. Now once you have all of your emitters running well and everything looks good, we can go ahead and plug both of our systems into these two pump circuits here, which are in fact controlled by our Argus box. So that actually can be controlled from a computer anywhere. That's all I have for you here with the Rockwool Slab hydroponic systems. Have a great day. And one final update with this system. I ended up going through and replacing all of these drip emitters as the old ones seem to be clogged. Those old ones are now sitting in DI water to hopefully help dissolve any salts that were inside of them so that they will be reusable in the future. This is just something to consider when you're reusing irrigation systems, is that there might be some clogging that occurs over time. Additionally, I've added these slats in the back that branch here just to help keep this irrigation line up off the ground. And the final thing is, it is always important to make sure that your nutrient stock tank is covered, as that will reduce algae growth within that stock tank. And algae is a very significant problem with all hydroponic systems. So this is what we've got going on to cover up the system now, although there are better ways. Again, that's all I have for you.